What's up, all you homies? All my homies. Welcome back. It's Friday. This is the Jason Stapleton program. Welcome to all of you who are watching live as part of the private members group. Appreciate having you as well, getting the video, hanging out, engaging in the conversations, and really appreciate all of you and your devotion to the show, and the rest of you just for listening. I appreciate you all. With me, as always, is Matt. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm fantastic, and I'm wondering why all the people that are listening to this now aren't watching us live.
There you go.
They need to.
Way to sell it.
Yep.
Way to sell it.
They're missing out.
I don't even have to sell it now. You're here. You can talk about, how they're not part and how they're missing out. I don't even have to do it anymore.
And they get to see the nice banter between us at the beginning.
That's
where
right.
Jason does funny voices.
We do a little bit of the pre-show. We had comic relief on the pre-show today.
We talked about puppies.
We did talk about puppies. And then, sometimes we have a post show. Not always. We don't always get around to a post show, but sometimes we do a little talk afterwards and hang out with y'all. So really glad to have you. I also do my Q&A every single month, answering questions from you guys. And it's just kind of a fun way to get together and spend time together as a group. And so I appreciate all of you all. And today we're going to cover a few different things. I got from the Twitter, I got a request from somebody. They just sent me a link and said this would be something good to talk about on the show. And the headline was, "The Green New Deal, How We Will Pay for It, Isn't a Thing, and Inflation Isn't Either." Not only is this guy terrible at economics and politics, but he's also a really bad headline writer, which I just as offended at that as a marketing man myself. I think I may be more offended at the headline than I am at the actual content. Although the content itself is just absolutely horrendous. And I read through it, and I got about 2 pages in, and I said, Matt, you have to read this.
Jason and I were getting angry reading it.
Yeah, we were getting a little frustrated. And he's using a lot of technique here. This isn't as good. You guys remember a month or so ago, I actually went through a very structured argument that someone was using, and I pointed out just how good he was at what he was doing and the way he was able to use influence and different influential techniques to persuade you to his line of thinking. That is not what this guy did. What this guy did was lie to you and attempt to confuse you so as to eliminate the risk of being challenged on anything that he had to say. This is completely different, and so not only is it badly written, it uses bad economics, it lies about the truth of what's been happening to our economy, all in the attempt to distort and to promote this green energy, massive amounts of spending on green energy. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. And I don't know how long that's going to take, so we're going to get into that relatively quickly. I do want to point out, though, have you guys been watching now? So this Donald Trump and Nancy Pelosi are like two little children in a schoolyard, and they're bantering back and forth. And so, this shutdown's been going on now, longest in history, and TSA's not. They don't care anymore. Apparently, they're playing rap music while you're waiting in line, and half of them didn't show up for work. Actually, it's not that bad. Only about 7% of them didn't show up for work because they're not getting paid. And Trump's got no intention of opening back up the government to the pieces that he shut down until they agree to give him his wall. And they of course are not going to give him his wall because they think it's to their financial benefit, to their political benefit, to continue this process even in through 2020 if it's necessary.
That was an appropriate Freudian slip there because it is to their financial benefit.
It is to their,
but
yeah, yes, correct. It is to their financial benefit as well. But so in an effort to put pressure on the president, Nancy Pelosi suggested to the president openly that he postpone his State of the Union address, which is on the 29th, I believe, because of security concerns. Oh, it's too dangerous because some of the Secret Service haven't been paid, and we just can't have it. You need to postpone it, Mr. President, in honor of those or out of respect for those who've been hurt by this shutdown. And what she's really saying is, you've caused a lot of damage, So you should take a back seat and not speak to the American people on the 29th as scheduled. And so here's the thing. The president can give his State of the Union address with nobody in the audience. So if Nancy Pelosi doesn't feel like the security is good enough for her to show up to the State of the Union, she can stay home. Of course, she won't, because she wants to be on camera and she wants to have all of the PR press that goes with it. But she also wants to try and put pressure on the president, and the president just wasn't having it. So Nancy Pelosi and her cohorts were planning on going to, now it depends on who you talk to or what you read. It determines where they were going and what they were doing. Let me explain what was really happening. Nancy Pelosi and a bunch of her friends, and I'm not even sure if there were Republicans in there too, doesn't matter, her political ilk, wanted to go to Davos, because Davos is where they hold the World Forum or whatever, the summit.
It's the international rent-seeking competition.
Yeah, really what it
convention.
is. Yeah. So the reason that they wanted to go there was because that is a gigantic PR and fundraising opportunity for them. It's a place where they can hobnob with some very wealthy business people and work out some deals as to how much money they're going to get for their campaign in exchange for political votes or something else that they can do politically for them. And so they want to go to Davos and be part of that, so they can kind of like rub elbows and do all that and hang out with a bunch of people who are rich and powerful. But it costs a lot of money to go over to Davos in Switzerland. Part of it's the flight over. So how do you get around it? They got to spend campaign money to fly over there. So their campaign coffers would be diminished. This is how cheap these people are, too. Their campaign coffers would be diminished if they flew over there commercially or privately or however else they wanted to do it. So what they did was they orchestrated a trip to Afghanistan first, so that they could fly in on an Air Force plane, land, go to the tour, force a bunch of military people to come out and shake their hands, and then they could get on a plane and fly to Switzerland, and it would be a lot less costly of a trip. So
why pay for it for yourself if you can have the taxpayers pay for it?
Why would you? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's just, that's just good business. But people are actually positioning this as what did they call it? Trump said
Trump is punishing the troops by depriving them of the opportunity to meet and greet Nancy Pelosi. Right,
because there's a ton. I guarantee. Having been in a Marine, I know just how many people are anxious to shake hands with Nancy Pelosi and spend time with her. It's funny, when I was in Afghanistan, I've told this story before, but when I was in Afghanistan, I was working on the U.S. ambassador's detail and providing security for him while he was moving, when he had to move in and around the country. Now, the nice thing about being on the AMBO's detail is that the ambassador at the time when I was there didn't like to do much. And so other than going down the street to the Afghan president's house to give him a check, there wasn't a whole lot that happened, which is I found odd to begin with. So let's say that you're the U.S. ambassador from America, and the president of Afghanistan wants you to give him some money. Why on earth would you drive to him? Why would you not be like, no, you all can come up here? And I think it had to do with security risk. They didn't want to let his detail in, and then there's a very alpha male society, so he didn't want to come in without his security team, and there's all this other garbage because they restricted where we could go on the palace because of security reasons, and it was just a bunch of junk. But anyway. So as part of being on the ambassador's detail, one of the things that I was also tasked with was pretty much anybody of note who came through Afghanistan during the 2 or 3, 4 years I was there. I was tasked with providing some level of their security. Now, my job was I ran the counter assault team for the ambassador's detail, which was a vehicle of 5 people, and we called it the hate truck. And because it was literally, it was depending on which vehicle we were using, but it was either a Suburban or a Toyota Land Cruiser that had been completely gutted out inside. So you had 2 captain's chairs in the front seat and the co-pilot seat, and then everything else had just been gutted, and they sprayed rhino liner in there. And then there's a couple of little benches for you to sit on, and the thing is just full of everything you like, hand grenades, automatic machine guns. Like I'm speaking in layman's terms here, but basically anything you needed to really mess somebody's day up was in this vehicle. And my job was to, or our job in that vehicle was to follow the ambassador's detail at a distance. And if anything ever happened, we brought the hate. We made it a really nasty day for everybody involved. And so that was my job. And we would get tasked to go and provide security for pretty much anybody else who needed it. So, you know, when Obama came, I was part of Obama's protection detail. When Nancy Pelosi was in town, when John McCain was in town, when Lindsey Graham came to town, we worked on their protection detail. And when these guys would come through, I protected the the FBI director, Robert Mueller, when he came through. And outside of the embassy, there's a gigantic seal, says U.S. Embassy of Afghanistan, and you technically are not allowed to take your picture standing by this seal unless you have permission from the ambassador. And whenever anybody would come to the embassy, they would always want to get their picture taken next to this seal. And on occasion, some of the people we protected would ask if the security detail wanted to get their picture taken with them at the seal. Now, before I tell you how we reacted when Nancy Pelosi asked, sometimes we would do it and sometimes we wouldn't. So when Robert Mueller wanted to get his picture taken, we went around with him for 3 or 4 days, and he was just the best guy to work for. He was very laid back. He was very respectful to the security detail. I liked him as a human being. He treated everybody well. He personally handed out challenge coins to everybody on the detail, and he made you feel like, you know, you putting your life on the line for him was appreciated. When Nancy Pelosi came, she got her picture taken, and she asked the detail, "Hey, do they want a picture?" And her little, you know, lackey came over to the car and whispered to the detail leader, said, "Hey, Nancy Pelosi wants to know if you guys would like to come over and get a picture with her." And he didn't even ask anybody else on the team. He just looked at him, and there was this pregnant pause of like, I don't know what it was, 3 or 4 seconds, kind of like, how should I respond to this? It was one of those, should I bite my tongue or should I just let loose?
Should I laugh or no?
And all he did, the only thing he said was he just looked at her and he goes, "Now we're good." that was all he said. And they ushered her off, and the truth is, most of the people who I worked with were very very conservative and or Republican type of folks, and so, but that never affected how we did our jobs. I can say that it didn't matter who we were protecting, because really, when you're on a detail like that, you're not so much protecting the person that you're taking around, you're protecting everybody on the team. So it's not just, it's about, hey, we all come back alive. This is a team effort for us to get from point A to point B, and you just happen to be the person who we're driving around. But really the goal is to protect everybody and make sure everybody gets home okay. So anyway, that was, they're positioning this as some sort of big to-do when really it's not. They wanted to go on a fundraising mission on taxpayers' expense, and in the last hour before they were supposed to take off, I mean, they were supposed to leave at 3, and he called it off at like 2:15, which means everybody was ramped up. The pilots had already had their mission brief. They were ready to go, and the president said, "Yeah, I'm canceling that trip. We're not going to have those guys fly to Afghanistan today."
I love that he added in the letter. He said, "Now, if you want to fly commercial, obviously, I won't prevent you from doing that."
Yeah. And then they came back. So then they come back after that and they say, "Well, we couldn't fly commercial because they leaked that we were going to take a commercial flight to Afghanistan." And I'm thinking, the only reason you were going to Afghanistan anyway was to hop on the military bird. You could have flown straight to Davos. You didn't even have to go to Afghanistan. But see, that screws up the whole narrative, and it also doesn't make the president look bad. So I say all of that, all of it, to make this single point to you. We are governed by children. We have people in our government who they're just like the people you see around the water cooler. They're petty, vindictive, awful human beings.
They're not more intelligent. No. They're not more capable. They're just more connected.
No, they're just they're no different. And in many cases, they're far worse than most of the people that you or I work with. And they are playing with the lives of a lot of people right now. And you notice none of them care about any of it. They don't care about the people who are off. This is why I say the government doesn't care about you. This is not about a wall to protect you. It's about fulfilling a campaign promise the president made because it will make him look good and make him more electable to his base. That's what it's about. It's about winning. It's not about you. It's not about security. Nobody cares about you. And I mean, I had somebody actually made that comment today to me. They said, it wasn't today, it was yesterday. They said, I just feel like nobody really cares about me. And I said, well, because nobody does. Again, I'm not making that to be harsh to you, but that's a cold, hard reality of the world we live in. Nobody does care about you. Like, you will have a handful of people in your life, a minuscule number. You could probably count them on one hand of people who really care about you, who would lay down in traffic for you, who would be on a plane this afternoon if you really needed them. Those people are few and far between. Sometimes family members don't even really care. And so finding those people in your life and investing in those relationships is of critical importance because there are so few of them out there. The vast majority of people that you spend time with, that you work with, that you go out with on the weekends, don't really care about you. And when the chips are down, they will not be there. And I promise you, ain't nobody in government cares about you. Every one of them is looking out for their own self-interest. The ones that are most trustable are the ones whose self-interests align with yours. So the guys like Thomas Massey, who honestly lives and believes his principles. The guys like this are guys that you want to give more power to because they're not interested in power for power's sake.
They have skin in the game.
Yeah, they have skin in the game. And so I don't know. It became painfully apparent to me today or yesterday when I read that article that I got to share this with people because this is the type of childish behavior you would expect from grade schoolers. And it's happening with the president and Nancy Pelosi. Shouldn't shock you, but it should be more evidence that these people are not anybody you should be investing any amount of faith in. Okay. Let me tell you something about our sponsors today. We got Indochino. Boys and girls, everybody needs to look good. You all need a suit. Every man in your life, ladies, needs a suit. And if your man's suit looks like something that he couldn't squeeze into, or looks like something that was, was a style that was popular, say, 25 years ago, time for you to get him a new suit. But the problem is, a nice suit is expensive. I mean, a nice custom-tailored suit, you go in, you have the tailor, take all your measurements. He builds the suit from scratch. He puts it on your shoulders. You got to go back in for a second fitting while they're getting everything right and doing all of that. That suit can easily run you $1,000. Easily run you $1,000. And they go up from there. But what would happen if you could get a custom-tailored suit that fit directly to your body for $300-400? I mean, you can't even buy an off-the-rack suit for that. Well, that's where Indochino comes in. Guys, they are North America's leading made-to-measure suit company. You get to pick out everything. You go on the website, you pick out your fabric, you pick out your design and customizations, you do your measurements, and it's really quick. I've done it. It takes no time at all, and in a matter of just 3 short weeks, well, a couple 3 weeks, they will send you a custom-tailored suit fit to your body. And this week, my listeners can get any premium suit at Indochino for just $359 at Indochino.com when they enter Stapleton at checkout. That's 50% off the regular price of a made-to-measure premium suit. Plus, you get free shipping. That's Indochino.com, promo code Stapleton for any premium suit, just $359 and free shipping. An incredible deal on a premium made-to-measure suit. Love this company. Have never heard a single bad thing about them. They really meet the standard. I've been impressed with them. So, and then you got Liquid IV. Somebody was actually asking me about this the other day. I was telling them about the workouts that I was doing, and I was, drinking water, and the claim that I talked with these guys for 20-30 minutes on the phone while they explained the science that went into this product. And what happened was they were looking at a lot of sports drinks and how much sugar was in them, and then they were looking at how people were how sports, like long distance runners and people who were doing Olympics, how they were refueling their body, and a lot of them were using what's that meal replacement shake that they use for I can't remember what it is. It's like old people drink. It's an old people meal. Ensure, yeah, thank you. So they're drinking Ensure. There's all kinds of chemicals and crap in the Ensure, and they wanted to find a better solution. So they invented this product called Liquid IV. And they claimed when they talked to me on the phone, they're like, oh, if you drink this stuff, your body absorbs 90% of what you drink rather than getting rid of a lot of it. Because normally when you drink a lot of water, your body just flushes that water out. And I said, I said, okay, let me give it a try. So they sent it to me, 16 ounces of water. I was already well hydrated, so I should have been peeing like every 20 minutes or so. I drank this thing, all 16 ounces at once. I didn't pee for like 8 hours. This might be too much information for you all, but whatever they're using in here actually works. They use it. They say everything from a post-workout drink to a hangover cure. That's what this is. I love Liquid IV, and I know you will too. Right now, my listeners can get 20% off Liquid IV at liquidiv.com when they use my code Jason at checkout. That's 20% off anything you order at Liquid IV's website. Go to liquidiv.com and enter promo code Jason to get your savings. It's 20% off. That's liquidiv.com, promo code Stapleton. Don't wait. Get hydrated today. Great product. And, lives up to the hype, as do all the products that we advertise on this show. Go check them out. Just found out Untuckit's going to be a sponsor on the show.
Nice.
Love that product. I was like, I had a conference call with them today, and they were like, did you get your shirts? I said, I already own your shirts. Like, this was not a hard sell for me. When they said you wanted to advertise on the show, I just said, absolutely. I'm already well-versed with your product. I own it. I absolutely love it. So, anyway, free promo for Untuckit. Where are we going now? Let's talk about this. Where'd this go? Oh, the Green Deal. Okay. How do we want to do this? Are you reading and I'm going to respond, or how should we do it?
That sounds like a good
you gonna try that?
Distribution of resources here.
All right, so let me load this up for you guys. So this guy's name is what?
Robert Hockett.
Robert Hockett. This is a Forbes article. Now, I cannot believe, number one, I can't believe that this guy has a job at Forbes. And number two, I can't believe that they ran this article.
Well, this is actually, he wrote this article elsewhere, and Forbes went out, sought it, and then
picked it up.
Picked it up, yes.
Even worse. Whoever the editor is needs to be fired at Forbes, because this is absolute garbage.
It's a Forbes editor's picks.
No, it's absolutely awful, which we will point out in painstaking detail here in a moment. And this is important because you need to understand what people... Number one, it helps you in assessing arguments in the future, and number two, it helps you understand the economy and business in a way that most people don't. So as we start to break these arguments down, and there are many in here, one of the things that he does in order to confuse you and to prevent you from being able to attack his argument is that he makes so many different ones, one right after the other, that it's difficult for you to get a hold of it. It's
an argumentative fallacy called Gish's Gallop, where you just inundate the person with all kinds of arguments and points, and so much that they can't reasonably respond to all of it, and then you're just like, well, you haven't responded to all of it, so obviously I'm right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to run through this, and essentially the first couple of paragraphs will lay out kind of what his argument is, but he's explaining why we need this Green New Deal. Now, did you research at all what this actually entails and how much money it would cost to do this?
Honestly, I didn't. No.
Okay. So Cortez has been out, this is Alexandria, Ocasio-Cortez has been out making all kinds of demands that we need free health care for everybody and free college for everybody and this whole new Green Deal that they're promoting. And all of it, I think the health care alone is like $36 trillion or something. Those are liberal estimates. And this would be, I don't know how many trillions of dollars they're suggesting this is, but we're going to talk about the argument for why it's a good idea and or why they say it's a good idea and how that argument is absolutely ridiculous. So I'll let Matt kick it off, and we'll stop and go as we read.
Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's announcement of an ambitious new Green New Deal initiative in Congress has brought predictable, and predictably silly, call-outs from conservative pundits and scared politicians. How will we pay for it, they ask with pretend incredulity. And what about debt? Won't we have to raise taxes, and will that not crowd out the job creators?
Okay, so we got to stop right there, because right off the very beginning, he's setting up. So what he is saying is, if you object to anything that he's about to say, you are, number one, you're insincere. Mm-hmm. Number two, you're scared. And number three,
you're silly.
You're silly, yeah, because you clearly no one would come to this with an ounce of legitimate concern.
So automatically, this isn't journalism.
No.
This is advocacy.
This is a pundit speaking and advocating for a specific, which is not. There's nothing wrong with that. Forbes does that all the time. My argument is not that he's making an argument. The problem is that he's lying, and that it's just this is bad economics. It's bad business. It's bad all the way through. Okay, go ahead.
Representative Ocasio-Cortez has already given the best answer possible to such queries, most of which seem to be raised in bad faith. Why is it, she retorts, that these questions arise only in connection with useful ideas, not wasteful ideas? Where were the pay-fors for Bush's $5 trillion wars and tax cuts, or for last year's $2 trillion tax giveaway to billionaires? Why wasn't financing those massive throwaways as scary as financing the rescue of our planet and middle class now seems to be to these naysayers?
So the second thing, so her argument is, where were well, they're there. We talk about it all the time on this show. There are the same people who are arguing against this are the same people who argue against other government spending, unnecessary wars, tax cuts that you can't pay for and that you just add to the debt for. The same people who argue for fiscal responsibility do so in all cases. Now, there are political hacks who are out there who are just arguing in favor of their own political party, but that is not to suggest, where were they? They're here, just nobody pays attention to them.
They're the people that he says are irrelevant and
correct
and politically worth ignoring.
Right. So the first two paragraphs of this article are designed to eliminate anyone who would suggest that this is a bad idea by claiming that they are irrational, foolish, they're partisan, and that they're scared, and that they just frankly don't know what they're talking about. Go ahead.
The short answer to how we will pay for the Green New Deal is easy. We'll pay for it just as we pay for all else. Congress will authorize necessary spending, and Treasury will spend. This is how we do it. Always has been, always will be. The money that's spent, for its part, is never raised first. To the contrary, federal spending is what brings that money into existence.
Stop. This is an economic untruth. There's no possible way that he can really believe this. If he does, then he is an idiot, because this is just patently absurd. He says, how will we pay for it? We'll pay for it the same way. Congress will just authorize the necessary spending. So what he's saying is Congress will just decide we're going to spend the money on it, and then we will issue bonds and sell debt in order to pay for it no matter what it is. Now, they can certainly do that. There is no reason why the government can't just print money and just put it out into the economy however they want to. The downside to that, which we will talk about is inflation, and we're going to attack his argument to that in just a minute. But he says the money that's spent for its part is never raised first. To the contrary, federal spending is what brings that money into existence. No, it's not. It is not the decision by government to spend money that it doesn't have that brings money into existence. Money is created in order to keep up with the amount of productivity that a country has, and that's why they print it the way they do. Now, we got to get further into this article before I can explain it to you, but he doesn't even understand what money is. He's confused about what money is, and for a guy whose job it is to teach kids. He's a lawyer who teaches kids about economic policy and business as it relates to the law. This is what this guy does.
He's at Cornell.
Cornell should fire this guy. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't even have a degree, and I know this guy's a moron.
This is the definition for people who have read Nassim Taleb. This guy is the absolute caricature of an IYI, an intellectual yet idiot.
Yep.
The type of guy who has no skin in the game and likes to use the economy as his own personal plaything to experiment with all of his special little ideas at the expense of whoever gets run over in the process.
Correct. Because it won't be him.
Nope.
He'll still have his cushy little job at Cornell, no matter how badly he F's up the economy. Okay, let's keep reading.
If years of bad or no economic education make that ring counterintuitive to you, you're not alone. Politicians and pundits who...
So hang on, wait, of course. So he said, if years of bad economic education makes that ring counterintuitive, so what he suggests, he knows that what he's saying is ludicrous. This is idiotic. And he has to counter that. And so how do you... Well, if your years of bad economic education makes that ring counterintuitive, then you're not alone. And he goes on to say,
politicians and pundits who ought to know better are with you, but the problem is readily remedied. Just take a look at $1, or $5, or $10, or dollar bill. The face you see is George Washington's, a public official's, not yours or some other private sector person's. The signatures you'll find for their part are those of the treasurer and the treasury secretary, not yours or some other private sector person's. And the inscription you'll read across the top is Federal Reserve note, not private sector Sally's note. Note here, note carefully, means promissory note. This guy's a terrible writer.
He is. He's awful, right?
He's trying to be clever, but it makes it very difficult to read. Money betokens a promise, hence money's relation to credit. We'll come back to this later. The money that Treasury spends is, in any event, jointly Fed and Treasury issued, not privately issued. That is to say, it's the citizenry's issuance and not some single citizen's issuance. It's like a promise we make to each other. Hence the term full faith and credit you'll hear about what back our currency and our Treasury securities. This fact of public finance bears consequences. Chief among them for present purposes is that raising the money is never the relevant question for federal spending, any more than finding the promises is a question for people who make and keep promises to one another. The relevant question, rather, is what limits, if any, there are on the promises we can make and fulfill. How many promissory notes, in other words, can Fed and Treasury issue without, quote-unquote, overpromising?
Okay, so this guy doesn't understand what a promissory note is. It's not an agreement of all of us to each other. That's not what money is. He completely misconstrues what a promissory note is. Let me explain. So back when your money was not fiat currency, when we just didn't print it at random, it was tied to something. So money came into existence because people needed to be able to safely make transactions over long distances. So take, for example, a man who had a great deal of wealth stored at a bank or wherever he was, or even with himself, and he had a very good reputation, or the bank he was working for had an excellent reputation. If he needed to buy goods that were, say, 200 miles away, he would have to take the gold that he was going to buy those goods with, transfer that gold from there 200 miles in order to have those goods purchased
via stagecoach.
Exactly, via stagecoach, which was very dangerous. And if you lost the gold, you were really screwed because it was just gone. So what the banks came up with and what individuals came up with were promissory notes. And based on your reputation at the time would determine how valuable your promissory note was. So if you were constantly screwing guys over with your promissory notes, no one would take them anymore. And if a bank didn't have a good reputation of making good on its promissory notes, then the bank couldn't do business either, and no one would want to put their money with that institution because they wouldn't be able to use those notes in order to conduct business. Now, what happened in America, and what happened in most countries, but we use America as an example, is that eventually there were a lot of different banks. You were issuing a lot of different promissory notes, and the governments in America decided that this was a problem, and so states started issuing their own notes, and finally the federal government issued its own promissory note, and it ended up outlawing the creation of promissory notes of money from anybody else. Okay? But when those notes were originally created, they were backed by gold. They were backed by actual physical gold that was stored somewhere else. That's the way promissory notes and eventually money came to be. It is not, as this guy suggests, a promise from all of us to all of us, and therefore money you can just kind of create. And the only real question is, how much money can we create without over-promising? No. This guy, what we're talking about here is if you create too many notes that aren't tied to actual money, you're going to create too many dollars in circulation. So inflation, to whittle it down to its very simplest terms, inflation is a byproduct of two things: the number of dollars in circulation and how fast those dollars change hands. And again, I've told this to you a million times, but I'll do it again. If somebody prints $1 billion of new currency and they leave it in the bank, it has no effect on inflation. Until they start loaning it out or handing it out, until that money gets into circulation and starts changing hands, it has no effect on inflation. But as soon as that money starts changing hands, and the more rapidly it changes hands, the more quickly inflation occurs. And the more dollars in circulation and the faster they change hands, the greater the inflationary risk is. This guy doesn't take the time. You see how simply I just explained that to you? This guy wrote, 7 pages I printed off that this guy wrote. This is something else that we talked about before. I talked about it in the video that I did on Facebook today. I talked about simplification. People who have skin in the game typically simplify to its easiest possible understand rationale. They choose the simplest solution over the most complex. People with no skin in the game, intellectual morons like this guy, try and complicate things as much as they can so as to confuse you and make you feel little. You guys now understand more about inflation, what causes it, with those two simple things: number of dollars in circulation, how quickly they change hands, than 90% of the people that you're going to run into, 99% of the people. And you certainly understand it better than the guy who's writing for Forbes and teaching college kids at Cornell.
He was Bernie Sanders' campaign spokesperson.
Of course he was. Okay, let's continue reading.
I would add, too, that he's making another argumentative fallacy here, or actually just a plain logical fallacy, in that he's saying like the signatures on it are those from the treasurer, treasury secretary, and that it's a Federal Reserve note, not private sector Sally's note. So he's saying because this particular example of money is issued by the government, money is issued by the government.
Right.
He's completely leaving out the possibility that it's possible for there to be money that doesn't come from the government.
Look,
we're just dealing with one particular example of money.
If I go write my name on your car, that's my car. Yeah. I mean, that's the argument he's making. Yeah. It really is.
I'm going to go lick your door handles.
It's mine now. Yeah. I'm dying. That's the dumbest argument I've ever heard. Oh, well, it's got the Treasury Secretary's name on it. I'm going to go write my name on his hood. That's my car now. Okay.
All right.
Well done.
Okay, let me see. Let's see where I was here. Whew. Okay. That is effectively the question of inflation, the question of promises outstripping capacity to redeem promises and hence losing credibility as promises. The cred of credibility is the cred of credit, not to mention of credo or faith. That's a parenthetical thought.
I don't know why that's even there.
This is precisely why lawyers, accountants, and economists schooled in the simple mechanics of public finance always tell you the relevant constraint upon spending is not some non-existent fundraising constraint, but the inflation constraint, also known as the resource constraint.
Okay, so what he's saying is anybody, it says people who actually deal in this, economists who are schooled in public finance, tell you that there is a constraint upon spending, not because they can't print enough money, but because if you do, you're going to have very, very serious consequences in doing that. Now, they're absolutely right in saying that. He, of course, disagrees. And apparently a mountain of historical evidence is untrue, too. Like when the people have done this in the past, what he's suggesting, clearly that's that this was just a blip.
This guy is the case in point example of why macroeconomics is akin to astrology.
Right. Okay, let's keep reading.
Okay, so the truth of the resource constraint is that money can be publicly issued and spent only at a rate commensurate with new goods and services supply. If the money supply grows too rapidly for goods and services to keep up, you get the old problem of too many dollars chasing too few goods, also known as inflation. If the money supply grows too slowly to keep up with productive capacity, you get the opposite problem, deflation, a far more serious threat, as we've seen since the crash of '08.
Okay, and I want to make a note about deflation here. Deflation is not necessarily in and of itself a bad thing. So, for example, we talked about on this show when gas prices fall. Okay, is there anything inherently bad about you being able to get the same quality good for a cheaper price than you could get it yesterday? The answer is no. The real problem comes when you see systemic and rapid deflation across multiple sectors, in the same way that you see inflation happen broadly across multiple sectors. In that case, you see bankruptcies and people can no longer sell their goods or their products for a price for what they purchased the initial the initial resources for. So, I'll give you an example. When you have hyperinflation, one of the things that people would do in, say, the Weimar Republic was they would walk in and they would want to pay for their meal before they ate it, because they would increase the prices at certain times during the day, and oftentimes the prices would increase by the time they got done eating their meal. This becomes a very serious problem. You think about that in terms of deflation. So let's say that a company thinks that they can sell their widget for $100. And they know buying the goods that they need to, and the production cost to create the goods costs them $80. So they're looking at roughly a $20 profit on that good. In a heavily deflationary environment, they buy their goods for $80, and by the time they can get around to selling their product, they can only sell the product for $75. This is a very serious problem because now they cannot make up the cost. Now they can go buy new goods and they can get a cheaper price on that. But deflation is happening so quickly that the companies can't keep up with the changing prices. So both deflation and inflation can be very good or bad. Inflation is really good when there's a high demand for your product and you can keep charging more and more and people are more than willing to pay it because they have the excess capital to do so. So inflation in and of itself is not a bad thing. Monetary inflation or deflation because of government meddling is always a bad thing. That's what I want to get across to you. Go ahead.
Over the past 4 decades or so, inflation in consumer goods markets, this is rich. Inflation in consumer goods markets, so-called consumer price inflation, or CPI, has been, by and large, non-existent in the developed world.
Say that again. Say it again.
Over the past 4 decades or so...
40 years!
Inflation in consumer goods markets has been, by and large, non-existent in the developed world.
He is saying that consumer price inflation hasn't happened anywhere in the industrialized world in 40 years. So we just did some quick Google searches, and we said, what's the price of a Big Mac in 1980? That was 40 years ago. You know what it was? 36 cents. That's what a Big Mac was. A gallon of milk in 1980 was
like
54 cents, something like that.
Which is fascinating. So a Big Mac was cheaper than a gallon of milk.
Sounds like it. Yeah, that was what I looked up online. You could buy a new Honda Civic for about $5,000. Mm-hmm. You won't get out of there for less than 15 now.
It was 22.
13, you were 22, was it? Okay,
so the price of a base model Honda Civic hatch has quintupled over the last 40 years. When he says that consumer goods markets have not experienced any inflation, price inflation.
That's just a flat out lie. It's just untrue. But you see, if you've managed to make it 3 pages deep into this garbage he calls, an article, you're already sold. You're going to pass over that and be like, oh, well, that must be true too. I didn't realize that. I mean,
because it's not only that it's not true, it's laughably not true. It's preposterously not true.
Anybody who's been alive more than 10 years has seen consumer price inflation. We know it happens. It's just, it's utterly and completely false.
So he says, our problem has been just the opposite, deflation. This is what slow, anemic, and even negative growth rates across the mature, he randomly quotes these words, across the mature economies in recent decades has been about. What inflation we've had has been concentrated in financial markets, where the ever more rich in our ever more unequal societies gamble their winnings. Meanwhile, those below the top have had to spend less and borrow more, bringing deflation and, worse still, debt deflations after the financial crashes inevitably brought on by asset price hyperinflations in financial markets. Okay, so why have those below the top, who presumably spend a lot of their money in consumer goods markets, why have they been having to spend less and borrow more? If prices haven't been inflating, as he claims, then why do they have to spend less and borrow more?
Right. And if
prices are deflating, then shouldn't that be good for them?
Well, and what he also claims is that you have. Well, see, he'll argue against the fact that there's been consumer price inflation, but then when you look at things like pay, what the average salary is, he'll claim that hasn't moved in 40 years either because of inflation.
If there's been no inflation, why do we need to raise the minimum wage?
Yeah, we don't need to, obviously, because there's been no price inflation in 40 years. You see what I'm saying? The argument doesn't even make sense.
The guy's a complete maroon.
And the problem is most people think about these things in a vacuum. So he can say one thing one week, something completely different the next week, and no one will ever say, well, that doesn't really jive. Like, how do you justify that against what you said yesterday? And if you ever brought it up to him, he'd be like, he'd probably run into a string of other arguments in order to try and confuse you and make you feel stupid because you don't go to Cornell.
Vincent in the group says this is a guy who keeps his thesaurus handy to sound smart. He totally photosynthesized the accumulation of the mitochondria, y'all.
Exactly.
He just spit some words at you because this is a guy who doesn't have any skin in the game, so it doesn't matter what he says. He can say whatever he wants, and he'll continue to get prized places as a policy analyst, analysis. Like, he can do whatever he wants and say whatever he wants, and he'll never pay the price for it.
Because he will never have to test his theory with his own money. He will always be with somebody else's. And my point is, look at how complicated his argument is. Look at how complicated it is. Just by the complexity of it, you should know that it's not true. And then when we point out obvious fallacies, you should just stop reading at this point, but we'll go ahead because there's a couple other things I want to point out.
Which takes us to the Green New Deal. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, whose university degree is in economics, understands as few leaders seem to do that our problems of late have been problems of deflation, not inflation. Good grief. She also knows well that both inequality and the loss of our middle class have both caused and been worsened by these deflationary trends, along with their mirror images in the financial markets, our asset price hyperinflations, bubbles, and busts. Her Green New Deal aims to do nothing short of reversing this slow-motion national suicide and end our ongoing planet-side in the process. Planet-side. To clarify, you can't really tell necessarily unless you're reading it. Planet side is supposed to be like
planet
suicide
genocide,
of the planet or something. Yeah. Because the Green New Deal aims at reversing undeniable long-term deflationary trends in our national economy, there is reason already to deem inflation fears, sure to be stoked by conservative pundits and scared politicians, a silly canard. But we can go further than this. We can catalog theoretical, empirical, and policy instrument reasons to laugh such fears off. The theoretical case against inflation worries is straightforward and comes in two parts. Recall the popular too much money chasing too few goods adage above. What this slogan captures is that inflation is always a relational matter. It's about money supply in relation to goods and services supply.
No, hang on. So he framed it up a certain way, and he says, well, based on that, it means that it's always relational. No, it's not always relational. You just framed it up that way and said this is what it means, and then claimed now that you're going to explain it away and claim that this is what the way you defined it makes it mean. It's absolutely laughable.
The Green New Deal aims to stoke massive production of a vast array of new products. Note, he says it aims to stoke. Not it will, it aims to.
Right.
Because all that matters is what they plan on.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what they actually do. From solar panels to windmills to new battery and charging station technologies to green power grids and hydroelectric power generation facilities. The new production and new productivity that renewed infrastructure will bring will be virtually unprecedented in our nation's history. This will be more than enough to absorb all new money spent into our economy. It will also distinguish the Green New Deal starkly from pseudo-stimulus plans of the recent past, none of which flowed to production or infrastructure, and nearly all of which simply inflated financial markets. So what he's saying is that there'll be a whole bunch of money pumped into the economy, but also it'll there'll be
this time it'll go where it's supposed to go.
This time it'll go where it's supposed
yeah.
to go. All these different resources that don't exist now, we're just going to magically bring them into existence.
And the fact that the government has misappropriated and misspent in the past on, remember Solyndra and all of these other that were just went bankrupt and they lost all this money. I know they've done it wrong in the past, but this time its money's going to go where it needs to go.
That's because in the past it was scared politicians and conservative
and this
pundits.
time it's an economist, a 10-year-old economist who managed to get a job in Congress. Hang on, I got to tell you about stamps before, and then we'll keep reading because it gets better. Okay, so stamps.com, guys. What are you doing for your New Year's resolution? Maybe you want to save a little bit of money. Maybe you want to save some time. Maybe you're tired of going to this post office. If you work for a small business or you own a small business and you do a lot of shipping, you ought to be using stamps.com because it's the simplest way to print U.S. official postage on any letter, any package, any class of mail, anywhere where you have your computer, and they make it no hassle. So anything you can do at the post office, you can do with these guys. With stamps.com, you get discontinued postage rates that you can't even get at your post office. Wow, I didn't even know that. He said not to mention it's a fraction of the cost of those expensive postal meters. They'll give you a free scale, by the way, free postal meter so you can weigh all your packages, get exact postage, never overpay. And there's no equipment or long-term leases at all. And right now you can enjoy everything stamps.com has to offer by just going, that includes a 4-week trial plus postage and a digital scale. Start your new year off right. Go to stamps.com, click on the microphone in the top of the homepage and type in my last name, Stapleton. That's stamps.com, enter Stapleton. Everybody likes saving money. Everybody likes saving time. And Stamps lets you do both. So go check them out. Stamps.com, promo code Stapleton. Okay, so these guys are, he is suggesting that this time, because she's the one promoting it, that all of this money, these, I'm sure what is the equivalent of trillions of dollars, will make it into this new Green Deal, and it'll get to where it needs to go.
She has an economics degree, Jason.
She has to, well, because she's got an economics degree, she obviously understands how an economy works.
She just has an undergrad. It's just a bachelor's in economics, I think.
I don't know.
Which I basically have. And I learned way more reading one Murray Rothbard book or reading economics in one lesson than I ever did in college.
I continue to be more and more hesitant about sending my kids anywhere to go to school because I find if this is the product of what they're creating at these schools where this guy's got a law degree and supposed to know about business, and you've got Cortez who's supposed to have an economics degree. If this is what we're cranking out at the college, why would I ever send my kids there?
This guy teaches this stuff.
Yeah, he teaches it. Okay, let's keep reading because we got a few minutes left and I want to get to this.
The second theoretical reason not to fret about Green New Deal inflation is related to but distinct from the first. It is that our economy now is operating at far below capacity, even as is, before the Green New Deal adds to capacity. Labor force participation rates still languish at historic lows, and wages and salaries have yet to catch up even to such little growth as we've had since our crash of 10 years ago. Indeed, they have stagnated for decades. These are classic indicators of slack which by definition is opportunity squandering, and which the Green New Deal now aims to take up.
Okay. Let me explain what this is, and we'll close it out with this because I want to explain what this guy's argument is. So he's saying there's slack in the economy, which he calls opportunity squandering. He's the same type of guy who will call profit, excess. What do the communists call profit? Or this, it's just like it's an excess tax on the consumer. Never mind the fact that when you remove the profit incentive, all prices go up exponentially. But he's suggesting that slack in the economy is opportunity squandering. No, it's not. It's a shift in where labor and resources are going. And right now, there is not enough demand to cover the amount of labor capacity that's out there for the skills that people have. So there's a period of time right now where you have record high, participation rates, or record low participation rates, and what's going to happen is those people are going to have to be retrained. They're going to have to learn new skills, and they're going to have to re-inject themselves into the economy where they are needed. But this is his argument. He's saying there's a slack in the economy, and so what we're going to do is we're going to have the government print a bunch of money. We're going to put all of that money into this new green energy technology that we don't know whether or not is really going to catch on or really going to take over. We're just going to flood it with money. and just throw it at the wall. This guy, that guy, let's see what comes out. And all of this new money will inject into the economy. All these people will get hired. There'll be all these new products that'll be created, and that will take up all the slack that we have in the economy, and that will stop the rampant deflation that's happening, that he claims is happening in our economy. Here's the problem with this argument. What he is essentially doing is saying, look, we're going to invest $1 million in this company. And this company makes widgets, green widgets, that cost $100. The only problem is, in order for these widgets to be price competitive, we have to sell them for $50. So we're taking a $50 loss on every widget that gets built just so that we can have all this money pumped into the economy. And if the government doesn't subsidize the other $50, then we're going to go bankrupt. This is what happens with ethanol fuel, for example. Ethanol would not exist as a fuel source if it wasn't subsidized by the government, because it can't compete with fossil fuels. Same thing with wind technology and solar technology. I laugh about wind technology. We've had windmills since Don Quixote was tilting at them, folks. I mean, this is not new technology. Now, the ability to capture electricity off of it and convert the power of the wind into electricity has some new capacity to it, but it's still not where it needs to be. And one of the things that we understand about this is when new technology hits, there are a lot of losers. And there are very few winners. A lot of people pour a lot of money into these companies, and a lot of investors pour money into these companies to try and get them going, and most of them fail. If you look at venture capitalists, okay, these are people who are experts at picking companies and industries and products that are going to sell. They have skin in the game in most cases, because if they go belly up, if the companies don't produce a profit or they can't build them to a point where they can sell them off and get their money out, they're going to lose everything and they'll go bankrupt. Therefore, the successful ones survive and are able to pick decent companies. Do you know how many successful companies out of 10 a venture capitalist will get? 2. 2 of them will make money. The other 8 will lose money, go bankrupt, or putter along for years, and they'll never see a return on that investment. Now, if the very best guys in the world at picking winners can only pick 8 out of 10 when they got their own money at risk, how good do you think the government is going to be at investing in this technology when they're not spending their money and they don't know anything about the industry and they have no track record of success in the industry? So what's going to end up happening is a mountain of money is going to hit the market. That money is going to be squandered and wasted. It will be flushed down the toilet, and you will see an initial spike of people making very good money, and then you will go right back down to where you were. And to top it all off, all that money that you pumped into that economy is now out there in circulation, and guess what's happening? Inflation.
And how does that money get out there? It gets out there by being given directly to the people who are the most closely connected to financial institutions.
Governments.
Yep. So all the people who already have money are going to be the first ones who get that. They're going to be insulated from the effects of the inflation, because the effects of the inflation will be downstream from them. And they're the ones who, the reason that people don't have money is often because they can't hang on to it. So if you pump a whole bunch more money into the economy and you give it to those people that don't have it, they're just going to give it right back to the other people who had it already.
It'll transfer to the people. So
it's just going to massively exacerbate the wealth gaps.
It'll transfer to the people who know how to make it and keep it, and it will transfer away from those who are not good with money. So how should this work? How should green energy and green technology, because we were talking about this before the show, I'm a huge fan of green energy. I would love to be able to drive a car that ran off green power and have a windmill that generated my own power and all these things. I want those things. I just don't want to pay the equivalent of $8 to $10 a gallon to fuel my vehicle by doing it that way, which is what they want to do with green energy. Now, how does it work in reality? Well, in reality, take, for example, flat panel TVs. It was not that many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, that maybe it was 30 years ago, 1990s. Flat panel TVs came out. 27-inch TV. I mean, we have flat panel monitors now you can pick up for $100 that are, flat panel HD monitors. Flat panel TV, 27 inches was $10,000. 10,000. And you go on, who would pay $10,000 for a 27-inch TV? Some really rich people with lots of dispensable income who want to show how rich they are by buying expensive things. You guys remember Wall Street, the old movie from the 1980s? Michael Douglas. You got Charlie Sheen shows up in the restaurant with Michael Douglas, and Michael Douglas is like, look at this thing. Look at it. And he's got what looks like a gigantic cell phone with a 4-inch screen, and he's watching the ball game on it with this huge antenna that's sticking out of it. He's like, a 4-inch screen. Look at that clarity. And anybody who watches it today just laughs. They're just like, what? Are they making a joke? No, he's serious. Like, that was something that only a guy who had FU money could afford in 1980. That was technology nobody had seen before. And now it's stuff that you couldn't give that away. Nobody would want it. You couldn't watch anything on it. Why do prices come down? Because people who want the technology are willing to pay a premium for it, even though they get no return out of it. They'll do it simply because they can. They want it because they have the luxury of principle, because they are wealthy. And it is the wealthy who have the ability, either because they want to be principled or because they want to have technology nobody else has access to, end up spending money and investing in that technology so that those companies who are successful and who create good products can go back and bring the cost of those goods down so that your average consumer can purchase them. So here's what I will leave you with today. What he's suggesting won't work. Government will waste it. Government will squander it. It is clear that this man knows absolutely nothing, doesn't respect history, doesn't understand the reality of what printing that kind of money would do to an economy, and completely discounts the multitude of times, the dozens of times throughout history that somebody has tried this and failed. If his logic serves, then what we should do is the government should today just print $100 trillion and should just put it into any variety of industry.
He literally uses the phrase helicopter money in advocacy of it later in this,
he does.
article.
But my point is like, if what he's saying is true and it's an economic principle that holds true, what we should do is the government should just print $100 trillion, should invest it in every industry, whether new or established, and then we'll all get super rich and everybody will have a job and the government can just print whatever money it needs to create whatever economy it wants to create. That's not the way it works, people.
What he's advocating is going to absolutely destroy all of the people who are vulnerable and gullible enough to believe what he's pitching.
The only way that this works, the only way that green energy will ever get to a point where your average American can use it, if we're ever going to get off fossil fuels, and I would love to be off of fossil fuels, the only way we're ever going to get around to that is if rich people who know and understand and are willing to put their own money into the venture, have skin in the game, invest in these products, and bring the cost down over time as the technology improves. That's the only way it happens, people. Now, what you can do as an American is, if you believe in this and you really think that this is something that we ought to do, you can either get involved in the industry and in the technology, or you can get rich so that you can afford to be one of the people who does their part by putting solar panels on their house when there's absolutely no way that they're ever going to recoup that investment because they have the luxury of principles. Those are your choices. I would suggest that you do both. Get involved in the technology if you believe in it, and get rich. There are lots of ways to do it. We'll be back here on Monday to talk you through it. Until then, guys, be safe. Be good. We'll talk to you then.